We're going to talk a little bit about how the stages of development are set before us, how they're predetermined, and we're going to look at the force of development, what's moving us from stage to stage or each step along the path. And first we are going to look at what we went over a few classes ago. We're going to quickly look at that and then we're going to move on. So we saw previously how there are phases before us and how once each phase, once the desires within each phase have been met, then we can move on to the next phase. And we found that each of these phases is an addition of both quality and quantity. And this represents, these four phases represent what we call the corporeal, or what we call physicality. And like we said, there are four stages in this development. And the first that we talked about was the idea of survival. It's our primal needs. This is where we find food, sex, and shelter. And this is when we first learn to have, or the desire to have has been placed in our heart. If we could have anything, and if we were honest with ourselves, we'd want a magnificent home where we could eat the best food and sexually satisfy ourselves until we'd had enough. And when this degree has been met and the pleasures within it have been filled, we move on to something new. The second stage that we looked at was accumulation. It's wealth. It's the idea of having, and if we can have anything, we would want as much of the previous desires that we'd already expressed ourselves through. So wealth is nothing more than the accumulation of our primitive type desires to the point where we no longer feel that we have to worry about them. And we go from having to wanting. And wealth is just wanting more of what we already desire. So once these phases have been met, these two previous, they fill into the third. And the third looks like fortune. It's when we desire power. And power is when we look at what we have and we want to express ourselves with it. So we want to use our tools. We look at a fortune, and a fortune can be intellectual knowledge, it can be wealth, it can be any item that builds us. And this is all we seek to do in the third phase. And when these three previous phases have been satisfied, they flow into the fourth. And this is our intellectual pursuits. This is knowledge. Now that we've used the things that we have and want, we want to be something with them. We want to express ourselves where what we have is a part of us. It's almost a personality. And that's what we find brings us to the end of corporeal reality. After this, we find a new reality. This is when the point in the heart, which is part of the thought of creation, develops us beyond this realm into something above. And this thought is the thought behind everything that happens. And it's to create a creature and fill it with unbounded, infinite, limitless delight. And that thought moves us from degree to degree as we advance into greater, more expansive pleasures. And once we come to the end of our physicality, we find this new reality, which is spirituality. And spirituality begins with this point, with this embryonic start that raises us out of our previous set of desires and into something new. And what it seeks to do is it seeks to add a new quality to what was previously experienced. And this new quality or attribute is what we refer to as altruism, or the concept of the soul. And as this point begins to expand and fill in our previous desires, correcting them by adding a force of above to them, this point, which is nothing more than the need to rise above this world, begins to expand until it takes over our entire physical reality, and clothing within it a spiritual reality. And the reason that this happens is because, in truth, there are only two things that are ever occurring. And within the true reality, there's a creator, and standing opposite the creator, designed in perfect harmony to receive everything from the force of above, is the created being. And this created being was designed along the quality of perception, which allows the quality of bestowal to find a place, to find a home. So as this reception began to expand and the vessel became fit for the reception of the light, something occurred. At this point in the stage when we were originally designed, we were in complete adhesion with all of reality. By the time our KLI, our desire, had expanded, it found itself in a peculiar state. While it experienced a connected reality, it had no sensation of this feeling. So that all of these points in common, all of these points in the heart that experience life in a unified form with no sensation of it, began to be separated along the X and Y axes of reality, so that each could no longer feel any of the others, as if there was a sense of separation from one another, while there was a longing for unity. And as each point felt separated, and this true soul, this original soul called Adam Harishan, as it felt separated, it longs for unity. And the problem originally was that in our primordial state, connected to the force of above, we tried to add the quality of the soul within us. And this is what led to the expansion and eventual shattering. And the shattering left us where we were in part small enough to receive this quality that originally shattered us. Originally at Sinai, it's said by the Kabbalists that there were 600,000 pieces of this soul. Each one of them was now small enough to fit within it the required 613 corrections. And this original correction, this point in the heart, was placed within each one of us, some in potential, others in actuality. And as we make these corrections necessary to reconstruct the shattered being, with each correction we find ourselves rising further and further until we reach the true reality. And as we've seen before, we found that this point develops us along a perfect reality that's been set before us. And this perfect reality has points of remembrance, lessons, attributes, qualities that need to be added. And as we develop along these points, remembering what's required of us, the revolutions begin to occur faster and faster, as if we're compressing both time and space. And in Kabbalah, there's two ways to develop, Hishena and Behito, in its time and to hasten time. And this is what we seek to do. We seek to shine the light that reforms upon us, correcting our impure qualities to their corrected form. And this is what has us rise up the ladder through spiritual world to spiritual world until we reach the full sense of adhesion, what we call devakun. And we have been sensing this quality, which we refer to as the soul, through the form of light. And if we look at ourselves as a vessel, as what we refer to as a KLI, type of desire, we have been feeling the force of above through the quality of light. And if we see this for what we desire it to be, then it's clothed, and we only see the outer quality. We see the clothing of it, the shell, the klipa, its incorrected form. We see it for what we want it to be instead of what it comes to give us, what it chooses to teach us, what it's trying to impart upon us. But if we could see within this light, and if we could look behind its other clothing and discover what's truly within it, we would find this quality opposite ourselves. And as we seek to sense this quality out, we gain more and more of it within our vessel. And that's what Kabbalah is. It's the study of relationship between light, pleasure, and KLI, the desire for it. So if we look at this study, we would find that we are in fact a vessel, we are a KLI, and this KLI is a type of desire that's either pure or corrupt. And what we need to do with this desire is put a barrier, a screen, a restriction upon it so that it can learn to seek what's in the light. And we call this screen, we call this a sak. This is a type of tool that will allow us to sense what's in the light. Now when light is received, it will hit our screen, leave some sort of a resonance, a feeling of what the light's trying to impart. And this light we refer to as or. Light breaks down. The original light, the total sensation of what's above, comes to us as or yashar. And this is where this point in the heart, this is where the word Israel comes from. The word Israel is fashioned from two words. Yashar, meaning direct, as in direct light, a direct sensation and connection with the force of above, and El, God, the Creator. The desires that are yet to be corrected, we refer to these as nations. These are nations of the world that will eventually gain the desire to be in complete adhesion and have a direct sensation of the force of above. So when this or yashar hits the masak, this sensation, this resonance, allows a type of gift to be had. We refer to this gift as or panimi. Panim means face, as an expression. This is an expression of the Creator. It is a sensation of the thought of above. It's a way to come into contact with the light. And what's also sensed is what we refer to as or makif. Or makif. Actually, what we refer to this as or hoser. This is the reflected light. The other half of the reflected light that puts pressure on the screen, this will be referred to as or makif. The difference between or makif and or hoser is that or hoser is more of a image, or it's almost a klipa, sort of a false sensation. It's a shell. It's the light, but it's the light that was unable to be received for the sake of the giver. And what's separated or left over from this light, which is the difference between or hoser, as in or panimi and or makif, the or makif puts a sort of pressure on this vessel. And it gives the vessel a sense of shame that there's something that wasn't able to be received for the sake of above. And the shame allows the vessel to expand. It must find a way to expand and receive all of the light from above. And as we receive this light, and our desires go from their impure to corrected form, it puts us in touch with the reality around us. And with each desire that's corrected, we come into further contact and sensation with the force of above. And in the end, what ends up occurring is this soul, this shattered part of the whole, ends up reconstructing itself. So that instead of having no sensation of the desires around us, these points of commonality, of similitude, end up sensing one another. And it's as if this point in the middle attracts the others and pulls these desires towards it so that it can incorporate the desires within itself. And as we do this, we begin to remove the space within us so that this void that we've been sensing our entire lives, this emptiness, this sense of longing, this need to take advantage of one another and exploit each other, this begins to evaporate. And all we sense around us is the good that does good. Because there's nothing going on in reality, nothing other than the force of above imparting itself within the desire to receive up below. And as we start to understand that the only reality that actually exists is one of loving kindness, the soul, and purity, we seek this more and more. We hasten time, and some of us, some of those 1,000 that enter and 1 that come out, begin to share this. And that's the whole point of Kabbalah, is to disseminate the wisdom. Are there any questions so far?